Good day, and welcome to Impact, a community affairs program of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. I'm Jeff Frederick. In 2015, the total losses attributed to cybercrime were estimated at $3 trillion. In the ever-expanding world of IP addresses, digital footprints, and electronic commerce, that number will likely double to $6 trillion by 2021. 3 years ago, Ginni Rometty, IBM's chairman, president, and CEO, said the following: "Cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world." Few CEOs would disagree. In 2016, 3 billion Yahoo accounts were hacked in one of the biggest breaches of all time. That same year, Uber reported that hackers stole the information of over 57 million riders and drivers. In 2017, 148 million consumers were affected by the Equifax breach, and in that same year, there were over 130 large-scale targeted breaches in the United States, a 27% increase. Oh, and that whole Facebook thing was a bit of a problem as well. Fortunately, experts devise ways to prevent cyber attacks, identify when the backdoor has been breached, and apprehend the perpetrators. Our government, military, corporations, and this university are working feverishly to protect our data, our networks, and our systems. How significant are the concerns? What can we do to protect ourselves? Our topic for today is cybersecurity. And joining us are Don Bryant, Chief Information Security Officer for UNC Pembroke, and Caleb Malcolm, Vice President of Information Technology for Lumbee River EMC, two seasoned experts with real-world experience in managing and protecting networks in the military and in industry. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don, you're in charge of protecting our institutional digital infrastructure. How do you go about doing that?
Well, here at UNCP, we've developed a model for success for cybersecurity where we combine tools, industry-leading tools, education, and partnerships through companies that we work with, and also through different internships to help out with some of the personnel shortages.
Caleb, you and Don both sort of cut your teeth in the military and now are taking it into industry or education, as the case may be. How real are the threats, and how do you take what you learned in your military experience and apply them at LREMC?
It's a very interesting transition, or at least it was for me. The governmental side, very structured, lives are at stake. Whereas you come into a utilities like where I work at a Lumbee River, while it's very significant, it's not quite the same degree of keeping a drone in the air or whatever the case may be. But the transition is pretty basic. I mean, defense is defense. Cyber defense, physical defense, it's still a defensive posture that all organizations would strive to achieve, whether it be physical or from a virtual standpoint through software or services that you get.
You know, both the military and your respective companies and universities, require really watching of some pretty sophisticated pieces of data, account numbers, access points, electronic records of education. How do you make sure that on a daily basis those records are being watched over?
For us, we rely heavily on our tools that we use. We have data loss prevention tools, we have anomaly detection tools that are constantly running in the background that are looking for signs of data loss or data breach. And we get alerted to those, and then we will look to research, mitigate, and recover.
Same thing?
Correct. The active part of that is what he described. The front end of that opportunity is ensuring wherever you have those relationships, where is my data? Who am I sharing it with? Why am I sharing it with them? Where am I sharing it to? Those type of things in the early parts of the conversation are strategically important to ensuring that you know the data you are transferring is going to the right destination that you sent it, or someone is coming into your environment. All those processes have to be established from the very get-go so you can have that active monitoring.
So you have these conceptual questions about who has access to my data and how am I watching it, but you also have operational techniques and tactics that you're deploying to make sure that even when your users don't even understand that they're being watched over, that you are watching for vulnerabilities.
That's correct, yep.
What are the kinds of things that keep you all from sleeping at night? What are the kinds of techniques that people employ to sort of crack into those back doors?
So the techniques are going to continuously, keep changing. The defensive posture and the triggers and monitors are the parts that I just want to always ensure that are operational. You control that environment, you control the gates, you control the doorways. You're able to maintain that situation awareness of what's coming in and out. So the thing that keeps me up is, am I monitoring my doors properly? Generically, there's only so many ways you can come in my door unless you're physically coming in to achieve something. So whether it's in my hardware itself is a concern, but that's a little bit bigger than small organizations like mine would be able to maintain. Those are the things that keep me up.
What about you, Don?
For us, it's a little bit tougher coming from the military where, it was easy to lock everything down and, prevent access, compartmentalize access, and, control it, who has access to what. But in a university setting, you have to balance academic freedom and, access to information, and you have to allow people to go out and grab that. And sometimes that's in unsafe places, and you have to balance the security side of it, and that's a tough one. So what keeps me up at night is, are we balanced correctly and preventing the loss of information that would hurt what the university is trying to achieve here, which is create a safe, secure environment for students to learn.
Are some of the tools that you both worked with in the military just not applicable, or are they just one era of evolution ahead of where universities and industry tend to have right now?
With my experiences, it's the military has a little bit more freedom and more resources to get some of the newer, nicer tools, and they're can stay on the front side of technology. For us, we're a couple years behind. We're getting there. We made a lot of progress, but that's one of the things that I've seen. Just resources, both monetarily and personnel. Just trying to work around that is one of our struggles.
Yeah, from the military, they're cutting edge. They're cutting edge because they don't have all of the constraints put on them. Academic freedom, public service communications that we have to release. We have a little bit more freedom. With that freedom comes a little bit more openness that's expected. On the military side, it's their way or the highway. They have a structure in place that says the information needs to be maintained. So that contains that a little bit.
And before we leave the military behind for a minute, there's all sorts of legends about how different branches of the military do and do not work well with each other. How did you all make sure that other people who wanted to share in some of what you're doing, other branches, other agencies, were apprised of what you were doing, and at the same time, how did you keep hands off between different branches?
For me, it was a struggle in the very beginning. One of my last duty assignments was at a centralized hub for the Air Force. And that relationship with the other services was absolutely critical to fall underneath the DoD umbrella. And we as a service evolved into that. We as communicators evolved into that teamwork makes the dream work, especially in cyberspace. Because a geographical space, you can defend that, and I fly airplanes and someone runs on the ground and somebody sails the boat. But in cyberspace, it's all one team. And there's no barriers, there's no service in cyberspace. And so that collaboration I thought was very, very beneficial and evolving very quickly in the recent years of my service.
I've seen the same thing. I think, probably, 10, 15 years ago, it was an issue. The different services were very separate. There was a lot of pride, and they wanted to, keep a close hold on their information. But since 9/11, I've seen a lot of sharing of intelligence, a lot of sharing of information, even with three-letter agencies and special operations forces, and across all of the different departments and services. So it's definitely made a lot of progress in just the last 10 years.
Let's talk about some common terms that get thrown around, and maybe you can help educate some of our viewers about it. Let's start with something like malware. Tell us what malware is.
Okay. Well, malware is malicious software, and It usually is trying to invade your system, whether it's a computer or a network. They are trying to encrypt, gain access to passwords, usernames, data. This type of software, it's evolving. They are starting to be what we call polymorphic, so they can change, and they can, you know, a lot of antivirus engines or anti-malware look for digital signatures, but when they change their digital signature, and it's hard to catch them until after they may be already in the system for quite a while. So malware stands for malicious software, and it has some malicious intent.
And what about like ransomware? How is that different?
So ransomware is just using that malware to achieve effects, right? So if I can use the malware, get into your space and fish my way into that space, and then I allow that software to be there, and then you communicate with you to pay me out or whatever it is I'm trying to achieve with you. You change your decision. If you think about it from a nation state standpoint, they want you to change a position, not pay money. But if you have the random hacker, they're trying to use that malware to achieve different effects. But ransomware is just the same type of concept as malware. It's just trying to achieve a different effect.
So malware can come in seemingly innocent forms, right? I clicked on this, I opened this attachment, I opened the front door without suspecting, but ransomware is designed for a specific effect. In order to prevent the situation from getting worse, pay me and I will digitally leave you alone. What about phishing? You mentioned phishing a minute ago. Tell us about that.
So phishing is, in my opinion, is one of the most common things that affects the users that may be watching this telecast, where, again, we're just trying to get information. I don't know everything about you yet, but I need an endpoint. And so I phish you a little bit. I may know a little bit about you based off of your Google searches or something from your Facebook, and I'm trying to gain more information about you so I can characterize you and then use that information against you. And those are just terms how I use to explain it to my family, that phishing part.
And our digital footprint has grown so much that if I wanted to learn just a little bit about information about you so that I could fish for more information like account numbers or passwords, then I could use the public information that I can find about you to extract some more private information.
Correct, absolutely.
So it's a digital con job. Yeah.
In a very short amount of time, in my opinion. It's not easy because it doesn't take much to send a message, and then I get to wait for it to feed me later on. In the physical space, I have to come, I have to talk to you, I have to invest time with you. In the digital space, it doesn't take much. I launch it out, I hit 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 users, and I may get 10 bytes.
But that might be all I need.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, tell us about what's the cloud, how does it work, and is the cloud a safer storage technique or a less secure one? Tell our viewers about the cloud.
Yep, that's an argument that we hear quite a bit. The cloud was designed to really provide a money-saving space to store your data, and then over the last 5 or 10 years, as the cybersecurity incidents increased, they moved to more than just monetary benefit, but also safe environment for the cloud. There's pros and cons. Yeah, you can save data center space. That's one less person that you have to hire to manage and keep that data safe. And there's less equipment that you have to use and maintain, but you lose a little bit of control. And you also, there is a little, you can gain security in some areas depending on who you are, but if you're an institution that maybe takes it a little bit more serious than whoever's hosting your stuff in the cloud, then you're leaving some of your information in the open. You could have a rogue employee that works for said company, or they can get breached themselves. So it's, there's pros and cons to it.
So you have hardware tools and issues, you have software tools and issues, and then in the middle of all that, there's concerns about individual personnel, maybe within your organization, but certainly outside of your organization, who are going to try to use all of these different techniques to gain access to some information that you don't want anyone to have.
Right.
That's what keeps you guys awake at night.
Yeah.
What are bots?
Well, from my experience here at the university, There's so many bots out there. They're basically a scripted computer program that isn't requiring a person to sit there after it's been programmed. It might be scanning websites for information. It might be automatically trying to look for vulnerabilities. And there's some of these bots are what we consider innocuous. They are safe, and they are just providing a service like Google Search. Google Search has their own Google bot that scans the internet for public information. So when you search for a word like, Dean of the Arts and Science School, it will show
Who would search for that? Nobody would do that.
So when you search for that, it will readily present that information. But there are also malicious bots out there that are looking for ways into the network, and they're just sitting there, just running, looking and looking and looking until they find a way in. So, yeah, that was a good question.
So a bot is just a kind of a series of computers designed to do specific functions, and like any tool, they can be used for good or efficiency, but they could also be used to try to launch lots of malwares or ransomwares, or shape opinion in one way or another.
Yep.
So really interesting stuff. All right, so there's cyber security, which is more on the defense side, but there's also cyber intelligence, which is more in the information gathering or offensive side. How do both of those really work?
So offensively, arguably I will use it in utility words, right? So offensive cyber for me is reaching out to the meters that are on the side of a particular home and understanding what that usage is, down to the minute, down to the second. I'm offensively reaching out, trying to pull information from my smart grid technology that allows me to communicate to my customer that says, hey, you have a high usage during this peak time during the day. There's opportunities for you to save money by reducing this usage. So I from civilian side, from a utility side, that's how I kind of label the offensive side. From a military side, it's a completely different animal that uses it to achieve cyber effects the same way you do kinetic effects from a military aircraft or artillery.
But on the industrial side, so what you're saying is that you can run some analytics and pull in some information about how you can make your customers more efficient or save some money by looking at the way in which they consume energy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And from an energy consumption standpoint, if you miss your bill at 10 o'clock and our cutoff is at 10, and you pay your bill online at 10:01, I can turn it back on at 10:02 through that relationship that I have established between the meter on the side of the home and my home office, without having to roll a truck, as we call it, to achieve windshield time. I have a driver behind a car, and he's driving down the road, eating up his manpower time to go turn you back on. That's what that offensive capability gives us.
And on the military side, the offensive capability is essentially designed to gather information about a whole range of things that another government or another nation state would have.
Yep.
Correct.
Hopefully we have people offensively gathering that information about prospective terrorists or other threats, 24/7, right?
Correct.
And without betraying any confidences,
Exactly.
I'm certainly sure.
That's why we're nodding and smiling.
That's right. So talk about ethical hacking. How does that work? Who would deploy ethical hacking? How does that actually work?
Yeah, ethical hacking is very important. It's been growing over the last few years. There's a lot of certifications that are being built around ethical hacking. We've got certified ethical hacker. Along with ethical hacking comes penetration testing. So there's new ones out there, Pen Test Plus and other different penetrations and hacking certifications. What this this certification is designed to do is to train people to infiltrate your network or other networks in an ethical way, looking for vulnerabilities so you can patch them and fix them. And that's, you've got good hackers and bad hackers, and hence the ethical hacking In order to figure out how to protect yourself and tighten up your defenses, you got to know where the holes are in your defense, and that's where the ethical hacker comes into play.
So sort of digital war games. Let me find out where my weaknesses are and how hard it would be to get into those.
It's a fitness test for your network. It's a fitness test for your processes, your hardware, your teammates. But it's from a view in which you normally don't look at it, right? So inside this room, I can say, yes, we're secure, but if I go outside and I start looking at it and going, oh, look, there's a vent right there. Maybe I can climb in through the vent and that'll take me to another direction. So ethical hacking is a key attribute, I think, to a strong defensive posture.
So one of the worst elements of being breached is the lag time between when someone got in without you knowing and when you actually find out. How do you make sure that you have controls in place so that you know as soon as someone breaks into your data that you know as quickly as possible, because the longer the lag time, the more they could do with your data, or the more that they could export it to other people. How do you shorten that lag time?
Yeah, that's a very tough challenge for cybersecurity engineers and all over the world. I think the last research that I've seen, it was over 100 days was the average time to detect that a breach had happened. So they're already in your network for over 100 days. This is where the tools come into play. And the more tools you have and the better tools, and you can refine the tools and set policies in place to alert you when you start to see activities. And one of I think the fastest growing tools out there is anomaly detection. So you're looking at changes in your environment. Before you didn't have information or data flowing to some country, halfway around the world. But over the last 3 weeks, you have a lot of information going there. And then so you'll have tools that can look at a baseline of what your network was doing before, and now it's doing something different. So maybe we should alert you to take a deeper look into it. And there's a bunch of other tools, data loss protection. You're looking at different IP addresses. You're looking at not just what type of data that's flowing in and out, but you can look at the flow. You're looking at packets and the flow of data, where and when and how much. So there's a lot of tools out there. It's just a matter of getting those tools and then getting the right people to fine tune them for you.
And that goes into a little bit of a capacity challenge that your IT departments, for example, may have, right? So logs can get created all day and reports can get created all day. Someone has to consume that data to put it in actual terms for leadership to respond to it, or for defensive postures to be changed. So I think it's also important to put that human element on that. The tools themselves are going to give you lots of information, but that consumption from an IT department, the manning, the training, the specialized, the characterization of that data, and knowing that on Monday at 9 a.m. I have X amount of data going out, and if it spikes, like you said, you have that trigger, that person that goes, wait a minute, we need to do something. You characterize it so you can respond.
So we'll talk about individuals in just a second, but institutions, do the tools sometimes overlap? Do I want to cover myself in multiple ways so that I have some redundancies, or do you take one really good tool that's with a great reputation and then just sort of rely on that one single tool?
Yeah, definitely. That's what we try to do. You can, 1 week you'll have Semantic Antivirus discovers this new virus or malware before anyone else. Then the next week it's McAfee, and then after that it's ESET. There's different technologies and there's different tools, and you do want to overlap them. So here at the university, we have layers of protection. We have tools that sit on the desktop or the laptop that are scanning for stuff. We have looking for signatures. We also looking for behaviors, not just signatures. We have network tools that are looking for changes in our network, that are looking for signatures and behaviors as well. You definitely want to layer it, because your situation's not always going to be the same. You can have the best network protection, but if you have a laptop that leaves your network and then you're somewhere else, you've got to have additional protection on that laptop, so it has to travel with you. So yes, we definitely need to layer and look at different services, as long as you can afford it and be able to manage it.
Yeah. And one of the things I like to think about in that question, that context, is today's locks on your home. You can get and reprogram all your exterior locks to work off of one key, and it's very convenient. But if that one key gets in the wrong hands, they have access to your entire home. So that's where, from a strategy standpoint, I like having different vendors in my atmosphere, not dedicated to just one, because if there is an incident, I don't want to get owned completely. I want to have that defense in depth, as I learned in the Air Force days. That defense in depth strategy, and that multiple players in there are both a little bit more expensive, but it gives you a little bit of assurance that if there is an issue, you won't get completely owned.
Let's talk about some things that we don't want to do as individuals, and then maybe we'll end with some things we do want to do. What are some common mistakes that people make that make them a little bit more vulnerable with their different devices?
I think Caleb had said earlier, you know, phishing, that's one of the big ones. It's really just stopping and thinking before you click or open something. You know, that's a tough one. You have to really reprogram yourself from when you're just, you know, flying through emails and you get one that says, you know, invoice, or, you know, you won this, or, you know, please click here to redeem your prize. You know, you have to stop and think about it before you click and open it, because as soon as you click and open that, it could look legitimate, and it could be legitimate. But that's where you really have to just train yourself and stop to think. But a few other things you can do to help. You know, phishing is the #1 threat vector for us. It just, you know, people are giving up their username and password because it's a website that looks just like the Office 365 login, but up top it says something completely different. You know, that's our main threat. But some other things you can do as an individual is just, you know, keep your antivirus up to date and keep your software and computer patched. Those are, you know, 3 big things right there for us.
It starts with the basics. It starts with the basics. If you train yourselves not to open the door when someone knocks because you can't see them, if you use that same philosophy on the cyber side, don't open up an email that you don't recognize, every email, because it only takes one email for you to get robbed in a virtual space.
Okay, lightning round, quick answers. Open Wi-Fi, yes or no?
No.
No.
Single password for multiple accounts, yes or no?
No.
I'm 50-50 on that one. That's tough, you know. So like going back to the balancing, you know, it's ease of use versus security, 50-50.
And how strong should my password be? Capital letters, small letters, numbers?
16 characters.
16 characters.
Exactly. That brings back my military days on that one.
Yep. And yeah, you should mix it up. You know, make it something that you can remember. Use you know, like a passphrase. My daughter, you know, her name's Zoe. Zoe loves to eat pizza, and you can put a capital Z, little L. You know, pizza, you can, you know, mess up the letters and mix it up.
Lots of ways to get in there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this has been great. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Caleb, for a really great discussion on cybersecurity.
Thanks for having us.
Tune in next time on Impact, where we take another interesting topic and talk a little bit more thoroughly about it. Good day.